In every episode of Dash of Grit, we talk about what you have to do to get through to the next side, all the extra work, all the extra strife, all the troubles, all the trials, all the struggles. Sometimes you got to ask for help. Mental health is a real thing, and we're going to talk about it next with Dan Flowers.
This is a Dash of Grit. Recipes for success from courageous leaders who overcome challenges and build great things. Now, podcasting from Spire to leaders in local communities like yours, here is Brian Leflock.
And let's get cooking. Folks, grit takes on a lot of things, and sometimes grit is about the people that you serve. And there are amazing things happening in the Akron-Canton region at the Akron-Canton Foodbank. And the gentleman that runs the Akron-Canton Foodbank shows a lot of grit every single day, especially with all the logistics issues that are happening now and the health issues, just trying to feed the masses, but also in his own life. And we're going to talk about that in just a little bit with my new friend, Dan Flowers. He's the president and CEO at the Akron-Canton Regional Food Bank. He is making a difference through grit, and you're about to hear his story. Dan, welcome to Dash of Grit.
Thank you, Brian. It's good to be with you today. And, shout out to everybody who tunes in today. Lots of love from the food bank, and hopefully we'll have a rich conversation that, may be helpful. I hope to some people that listen. For sure.
Yeah, you know what I think about this show, Dan? I'll just say it now. I think if one person finds it helpful, it's worth it. And if 100,000 people find it helpful, it wasn't any more work on our part. It just touched a bunch of people. And so I'm really happy. And I think probably you think of it that way too. And with that being said, let's talk about the great things that are happening at the Akron-Canton Food Bank. You guys are taking care of business and you're making a difference. Tell me a little bit about that effort and what you guys are accomplishing there.
Sure. Well, just kind of a basic overview. The Akron-Canton Regional Food Bank is the source of emergency food for 600 soup kitchens, homeless shelters, food pantries, primarily faith-based food pantries across 8 counties of Northeast Ohio: Medina, Summit, Portage, Wayne Stark, Tuscarawas, Carroll, and Holmes counties. And we collect typically, before the pandemic, we got almost all of our food from donations from the manufacturing sector for the grocery business. And then we would bring those donations to our food bank, and then we would distribute them from our location here in Akron. And we have a brand new food bank that we just built down on Cherry Avenue in Canton. And then charities would, essentially place orders off our website and take that food back and then give it away to about 250,000 people a year that we reach. That's an unduplicated count. So every day,
every day, 250,000, or is a total 250? What's the difference there?
That's 250,000 unduplicated clients per year.
Wow.
So now, and the average person comes about 6 times in a year. Okay. So you can multiply that out. It's quite a few visits. Every day, thousands of people going to food pantries and homeless shelters, being served in residential treatment facilities, and almost all of the food that's distributed from all of those locations comes through the Akron-Canton Regional Food Bank here in our community. We are one of 200 Feeding America member food banks around the country. We've become, over the years, the largest human service agency in the region that we serve. And we did a total of about $60 million worth of business last year. So it's grown quite a bit.
And what's the biggest challenge? We talk about grit. What's the biggest challenge in your role? Because there is the logistics of getting it to the other distribution centers. There's the acquisition of the food in the first place. There's getting it out to the people to use it, which is where the end result is felt. What's the biggest challenge for you guys on a day-to-day basis?
Sure. Well, anytime I get that question, there's always 2 categories of possible responses. And I think it's true for leadership that it's both art and science, right? On an objective plane, you can look at recent challenges like the supply chain dynamics and how difficult it is to find surplus food in an environment where manufacturers are struggling to supply the retail sector. That's been a very pressing and significant challenge for us. Just the day-to-day struggles of making sure that you've got a workforce. It's been difficult. We had a gal resign a few weeks ago to go to work for a nonprofit in Wisconsin, and she's working from home. So, we're certainly competing now nationally for talent, and so there's a lot of challenges that aren't just unique to the nonprofit sector. I think they're true across all the, employment sectors right now. If I was to say, what is the hardest most difficult challenge, I don't really struggle with practical problems. I mean, to be honest, they have objective problems and an objective reality have pretty clear pathways towards resolution or acceptance. Where I think it's difficult to be a leader right now is in the heart space. I mean, people are burnt out. There's a lot of division in this country, and when you've got a lot of departures, vacant positions, that creates a real leadership challenge where you have to continue to try to motivate and inspire people, make sure they know you love them, and try to keep just maintain optimism in a time where you don't always feel it. So there's been a lot of challenges, but we tried to stay focused. I think we're doing a lot of great things down here for sure.
So let's dig into that just a little bit, and then I want to talk about you and some of your personal things that you had to overcome. But I'm wondering too, you serve people who are hungry, have food because of your and your team's efforts. So it's a people business, but sure, it's not just a people business because you don't always see these folks. You're in the day-to-day on logistics and getting this truck here and that truck there and this supply line filled. At the end of the day, when you go home and your wife and kids or whoever is waiting for you at home says, "How'd you do today, Dad? How was your day?"
Yeah.
I mean, is it about the people that you serve, or is it about the people you're working with and trying to get the day-to-day done? What motivates you that way?
Yeah, probably like in an ideal capacity, it's about the former, right? It's about the mission. It's about the mission forward. Now, but I think probably most people that have served in any type of an operation like this would tell you that it's their relationship with their coworkers, the people that are next to them on the line. I think soldiers will say the same thing. It's like, I knew I had a mission to do, but it was the person next to me, that I was fighting for. And so in many ways, you tend to close ranks certainly during the pandemic where we've worked harder than we've ever worked before. I think there's been a lot of that spirit and ethos. But, let me tell you, Brian, I think a lot of people have a perception like, I'll bump into people at lunch and be introduced and say, "This is my friend Danny. He works down at the Foodbank," and people will be like, "Oh, good for you."
Yeah. Right.
And it's like, and I appreciate the sentiment. I really, really do. But I think that people tend to overestimate the extent to which having a mission can get you through the tough times. I mean, what gets you through the tough times in any business is your refusal to quit. Like there are a lot of times where, I feel deep connection and meaning and purpose in life as a result of this. There's, a lot of times I go home with a headache, feeling sick, worried about my staff, worried about my kids for one reason or the next. And the only thing that can ever help you get through those times in life is a little deeper reserve. I've met some real angels in this work, and I've met some real grumps in this work. And so it's really just about mindset to me.
Yeah. And let's talk about that. It's a perfect transition to where I think we're going to head is about mindset. And you're a go-getter and you're getting it done, but it's not always that easy. And this is Dash of Grit. We talk about the hurdles you've overcome. I want to ask you about some times in your life when it wasn't so easy, when positive mental attitude or just stick-to-itiveness or grit wasn't enough to get you through. Can you share some of those stories with us?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you had told me you were going to ask this question, and, I gave a fair amount of time thinking about, well, what can I say that was of value, to people in a way, and certainly I could give a pep talk. I could give a motivational speech. I could talk about, grinding through and all that. But in a way, I think I'm about to, because, there's certainly a great deal of resolve that's required in confronting some of the bigger things in life, which, hit you deep on the inside. I lost my dad a year ago, and he died 6 weeks before we cut the ribbon on our new building in Canton. And I could talk a lot I'm still grieving.
Yeah, I know how it feels too, and it won't go away anytime soon, Dan. I wish I could say differently.
Do you have your dad?
Yeah, and he passed away 1.5 years ago. And it's amazing how all of a sudden, like a big wave, boom, just knocks you off your seat. So I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I do. And we both miss him terribly. And I don't know how to explain when you're trying to work, you're trying to take care of your family, you're trying to take care of all the things you're trying to take care of, all the responsibilities you have. And then this very real thing happens. And the rest of the world expects you to move on and keep doing. And it's just not possible. And yet it's also not possible to stop and wait and life goes on. And it's just, I know more than enough people are listening now that know exactly and probably wish they could talk to us right now about their experiences. So
Yeah. Well, grief is a real thing. And, it happens in the presence of everything else that you are confronting in your life.
Yeah.
And, there's so many things that have come along with it that I didn't anticipate. The existential concerns, I guess I've always been a fairly philosophical guy, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about those things. But, I think that there's a certain awareness, like I'm the old guy now, in the family, or, but in so many ways, I feel like my dad taught me right up till the very end how life's to be lived, and even how to die, the way he faced it with so much courage and strength, and so, that's certainly been an aspect of my experience. But, one thing that I did think it might be helpful to share with the viewers, listeners today to this podcast is this experience I had about 10 or 12 years ago, working through this bout of pretty significant anxiety that kind of caught me off guard. And it set me back a little bit. And I had to spend a lot of time working through, and I don't think you're ever done. I think it's, an anxiety kind of a situation is a gift that keeps on giving,
Can
but I
you
think
take
a lot
us
of
to
people,
that and talk about that a little bit of what was causing that anxiety? What were you feeling?
Yeah, I'll certainly do that. I do want to acknowledge, though, right now is a period of particular challenges for mental health. Now, there are people that, as a result of factors in society, the pandemic, coming back out, getting back into the workplace, are experiencing anxiety maybe for the first time in their life. Maybe they're worried about what's wrong with them or what it could mean for them. And so today, if you're that person, or if you've had struggles with mental health before, anxiety, depression, or whatever your situation may be, I'm talking to you today. And so this is my story. And Brian, I'll try to just keep it high and tight. But I'll just share that, I'll just kind of rewind. When I was a kid growing up, we had a perfectly normal family environment up until I was 10 years old. And my mom was shopping at a Meijer's grocery store, and a display of toboggans that was way up on a shelf just fell down and fell right on top of her and knocked her out cold. And she just lost a bunch of weight, just got her gold pin from Weight Watchers. Life was going good for her. She was about 40 years old.
Yeah. And
something happened when that toboggan display fell on Mom. I think she got a head injury or just something. It awoke something in her. And it set about a 12 to 14 year struggle with severe anxiety, bordering on agoraphobia. That totally changed everything about our life when I was a kid growing up. Mom, she got so, like, when she would drive to work, she'd have panic attacks, and she'd pull over and Dad would have to go pick her up. And that led to a lot of depression. And she spent, from the time I was 10 to about 24, 25, just sitting in a dark room, kind of in the back of the house, just trying to cope with life. And she was scared to go and get help. I think she was scared that they'd take me and my brother Dave away from her. And it was a time where they didn't have the kind of pharmaceuticals and stuff. And so I kind of grew up knowing that there was something wrong with my mom, but nobody could put a finger on it. Yeah. And, but it made me very sensitive to conversations about mental health. It made me really scared about what mental health could be, how hard it could hurt, how bad it could be for a family.
Did you know then that it was mental health? Because I know there's been a big awakening in society where mental health is now something you can talk about. It's now something that's not so meant to be kept in a closet somewhere. Did you know then, or did you know just something wasn't right?
Well, we certainly knew something wasn't right, but Mom was scared to approach a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
So she
the stigma and everything else. Yep.
A neurologist. She would do all these other things thinking that she could find some kind of a diagnosis. Well, she never did. And, it wasn't until after I'd gotten married, my wife and I had been visiting over to see Mom. And I just noticed how good she was doing, how she just seemed to be so at ease. And, she was a lot more active and doing places. And I said, Mom, what is going on? You seem to be doing great. She said, well, my doctor put me on an antidepressant. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Well, she was essentially 20 milligrams of Celexa away from being kind of her normal self. And it cost her a lot of happiness and a lot of years of her life.
Yeah.
But at the time, I just kind of thought that was a mom problem, I've always been kind of a driven guy. I don't think I was even conscious of the fact that, maybe there was a part of me that because I'd seen her go through this, had built this wall or barrier, this sort of machismo that made me deny that I could be ever susceptible in any way to anything related to mental health. Because I didn't want that to be my experience. I knew the pain of it being hers. And I think it caused me to build a lot of barriers. And then I think when you look at the obsessive work habits that I brought into my career, I talk about grit. A lot of people grit, and grind because they've got an anxiety problem and they're running from it. And I don't think you can talk about, guys like David Goggins, or people that really grind real hard without saying there's a certain neurological thing going on here.
Tell me more about that. Tell me more about that. What's going on in there? Let's not leave it right at that, because I think you're absolutely right, but you've got firsthand experience. What's going on inside now that you look back that's causing that drive, which is also causing the anxiety? It's almost like the snake eating its tail, isn't it?
Exactly. So I think there's a real relationship there, because like if I didn't have both a almost infinite reservoir of energy, and follow up so obsessively, I probably wouldn't have found the success that I have in my career. But I have to also recognize that my great strengths are a great weakness in another context. And, that energy, the fact that when I sit down, I can't stop bouncing my knee, this is energy. And I have a baseline nervous setting of 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 at rest.
You're just always going, always up, always moving.
Yeah, I'm sure if I would have been a kid in today's society, they'd have had me on all kinds of medications.
Oh, yeah, right.
And I would never fault anyone who puts their kid on those medications. But I also would say, we have to be careful when we think about, pulling back our kids' natural tendencies in some ways. Yeah. And I think, that's a different conversation.
Yeah, right,
but in any regard, for me, though, now, where it all kind of came to a head is my dad had a heart attack in 2008. I was working a lot. I was 38 years old and drinking a ton of caffeine. And I went out to give out a speech one day in Kent, Ohio. And I got there. I wasn't prepared. I was late when I got there. So I was already just humming. I got up. There was a really big crowd. I had nothing prepared, which was never a problem. I would just get up and ring it. And in the middle of my speech, I felt my heart started to pound and my hands started to tingle and go numb, and the whole room started like moving, and my palms were sweating. And so I just felt like I was having a full-on heart attack. It was something that I had never experienced in my life. It hit me like a wave.
Yeah.
And, I don't know, like, did you watch The Sopranos?
Yeah, I watched those. I don't remember all of them, but I watched it.
So Tony Soprano had his very first panic attack while I was out feeding the ducks. So the ducks flew over, and he has his first panic attack. He passes out at the barbecue. And, he goes to see Dr. Melfi, and he's like, what happened? Well, it was very similar. Like, I was in the middle of the speech. I'd never had anything like that before. I went to the hospital thinking I had a heart attack, and they ran some tests, and of course, came back and told me that I'd had an anxiety attack.
And how did that make you feel when you came back and said, no, it's anxiety? Did that make you feel weak? Did that make, right at that moment, better now, but did it make you feel confused, challenged, make you more anxious? How did that make you feel?
I was humiliated.
You okay?
I was humiliated.
Wow.
I was humiliated by the experience of not being able to finish my speech, and being on the receiving end of the authentic and genuine concern of that 100 people that saw me have a total meltdown in front of them that day. It embarrassed me to no end, because, my whole view of the world was lay it on me. I can take it no matter what. I was 32 when I got hired to be CEO of this Foodbank, one of the youngest CEOs in the country. And it's because I get after it, and work like crazy. And so for me, getting that diagnosis, it was like, what? I called my wife, who was at Geauga Lake with the kids. She pulled them out of the lake and came and picked me up at the hospital. And she was like, what happened to you? And I was like, you'll never believe this. So I went home that night and started my life as someone with an anxiety disorder. I didn't really know it at the time, but I got on the treadmill that night and went for a long run, and I was like, what happened to me today?
Yeah.
What do I do about this? Well, I woke up the next day. My first thought was, I hope that doesn't happen again today. And that led me to think about it at lunchtime and at 2:00 and the next day and the day after that. And I went back to that same Lions Club and talked to him the following Thursday. And I'd never been so scared before I got up to give a public speech. And I never had public speaking anxiety, never. Yeah. But I was scared to death that would happen again. And these were the seeds being planted of this fear of public speaking, this anxiety disorder that then started creeping into other areas of my life. I was like, well, geez, for a staff meeting, I was worried I was going to have a panic attack at a staff meeting. Or when I go to have lunch with an influential businessman. So it's really started to creep into my life.
So I'm interested in if it's creeping into your life like this, like if it's a broken leg, you got a cast and you're off work for a while, or if it's a heart attack, you're laying in bed for a while. You were told you have an anxiety issue and it caused all that stuff. And yet you jumped right back in and you're talking about how this is happening and this is more. I mean, did it get worse before it get better? Or wow. Okay.
A lot worse.
So you didn't take the advice. You didn't take you actually kind of took it like the He-Man that you are. You said, no, I'm fine. You're not going to stop me. And you just dove in harder.
Yeah.
Wow.
There was a lot of stigma.
That's almost sad.
There still is.
Yeah, there is. So then what? I interrupted you. Go ahead.
It is sad.
Yeah, it is. It's sad that we treat.
Super sad.
It's sad that we treat a diagnosis of mental. I can't even say it. Problem, right? It's almost like there's such a stigma on it that you just put it aside. You put it in the back burner. You say, nope, not me. I'm good. And yet if you had a broken finger, everyone would know. You'd have all kinds of medication. You'd be canceling a couple Zoom meetings because you couldn't get online. But you just kept on going. I think people do that now, and it's sad.
I didn't tell anybody about it. Nobody. And it got harder and harder, and every day I was tormented by this, spiraling, escalating fear of these anxiety attacks. And not just the fear of the anxiety attack, but having them, because, once that, cat's out of the bag, so I was, I really struggled. And, my brother, who's a clinical psychologist, you see, Dave took that experience growing up and he leaned into it. And I did the opposite and ran from it.
Yeah.
And I always was like, Dave, mental health is your problem. Mom, that's you guys. I'm on this side of it. I'm the grinder. I'm the successful one. And, I talked to Dave about it. And finally, I just came clean. I was like, bro, dude, I'm struggling, man. I mean, I'm having all this anxiety. He's like, we should go see a therapist and talk to him. And it was not a lot unlike Tony Soprano's first visit with Dr. Melfi, man. I went in there and I was like,
I'm fine.
Not comfortable. Nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with me. I didn't want to sit. I refused to sit on the sofa. I asked her if we could sit at the table, with my Padfolio in front of me and a suit and tie. I just was not, open to having, these discussions. Well, I think she kind of, in fact, I've imagined a lot of times since then in her notepad, she probably wrote like, this guy's full of shit. Like on day one, I think she had my number from the start. Yeah. But I think she saw a lot of people like me. I think I'm not the first, executive to come through her doors, and so we spent about 6 or 8 weeks together and she gave me this nice little checklist and I kind of learned a little bit about anxiety. And she said, you should think about taking some kind of a medication. And I was like, not a chance. Yep. Not a chance. I've spent my whole life hunting around firearms. There's no way I'm going to put myself in a position where if I want a security clearance someday, I'm not going to talk about mental health. I'm not going on a medication for mental health.
Yep.
And she was like, well, you should think about it and do what's the most compassionate thing. And I was like, okay, I'll think about it. Well, the stuff I was doing was working, but I still was struggling. If I get scheduled to speak, I would start having this anticipatory anxiety and I get up in front of people. And you know what? I never canceled the speech. I never avoided. I never took a day off work. I never failed to answer the bell. I just suffered in silence. And so, I finally went down. I got the prescription filled. I stuck it in my safe for a year. I was so scared to take it. Yeah. So scared to give in. And finally, I went back and saw her. She was like, what are you doing? Just try it. I was like, well, okay. So I did. It was probably the best thing I ever did for myself, Brian. I mean, It's the same stuff my mom takes, 20 milligrams of Celexa.
Is that right?
In the morning.
Wow.
Yeah. And it just took my number, my resting anxiety number from 7 to like 5.5 or 6. Didn't change the way I think. It just calmed me down. And it just made my life a lot more comfortable. It's almost like, it's weird because it doesn't affect you cognitively like drinking, but it's like 2 beers relaxed.
Yeah.
That's the way I tell people it is.
Yeah.
But it's really what I needed. And that was about 10 years ago. And when I look back and see pictures of me, not just then, and it breaks my heart to see how bad I struggled every day. When I look at pictures before then, when I had all these signs, but I didn't acknowledge it. And I think I lived such a so much less life, Brian.
Back then when you were going, now that you can see it and you wish, like, don't all of us wish we could, either that one thing or those 100 things that we could do over again and it would change things. And the question I have for you, there's a lot of people that are listening right now that haven't admitted it. They feel it. They wonder now. They're hearing you talk about it. We can talk about what they might do, but I'm interested to know from you, now that you have changed, you used to grit, hard driving, get it done. No stopping me. I'm a real man's man. And now you've got your nervous level down to that acceptable level. You're still grinding it. Let's talk about success out of that. Are you more efficient? Are you more happy? Are you more effective? Is there something that's not getting done now because you're not just pushing so hard? I mean, what's the outcome of now accepting it and going forward?
You know what? For me, I get after it every bit as hard as I ever did. I mean, I'm an older man now. Like, so, when I do jujitsu, I don't roll like I used to. I promise you that, like my martial arts has had to change, but like, I think for me, more than anything, I was just wired. I'll be honest. I think it was the medication more than anything that made a difference for me.
Yeah.
Just simply because I was just hardwired that way. I mean, I definitely think like learning to meditate. I have this like anxiety checklist my therapist gave me. And it's like, if you're having a lot of anxiety, are you working out? Are you getting 8 hours of sleep? Do you have a big deadline? So you can step back and say, like, these are things that contribute to anxiety. And if I read down through this list and I see like, all right, this is why I'm above the red line, and maybe there's something I can do or delegate, maybe just on the margin, I've been able to use those. I think simply having that medication in my life has helped me be a lot more just comfortable in my own skin. Yeah. I've experienced a lot less anxiety in meetings and stuff like that. And also I think too, another thing that really changes is when you're early in your career, you don't really have a track record to stand on. And so you're really, really wrapped up in what people think of you. Well, I've been CEO down here for 20 years. If you don't think I can do it by now, I'm not going to convince you. Yeah. There's nothing I can do. So I am who I am. But it's interesting, here it is 2022. I did a podcast in January of this year where I told the story, and I confessed to taking this medicine for the very first time publicly. Yeah. And of course, I've had a lot of people reach out to me and, say it was a brave thing to do. It doesn't feel brave to me, I didn't talk about it for all those years because I didn't feel like I was safe to. I thought that somehow it would fundamentally shift people's perception of me. So it meant a lot to me to put some years on the table there of high performance so that, people could see, you can do it with these types of conditions. I still struggle with it from time to time. I wouldn't lie. I still have it, but for 20 years now, I've been showing up. And so if that's you today, if you're, someone that's listening or watching or paying attention, and you're just feeling like, man, this is really affecting my daily life. I'm so depressed. I don't feel like getting up for work. I feel miserable, or, I have anxiety. I feel like I'm having anxiety attacks. I dread going to meetings. I dread sitting in meetings. If I have to speak publicly, when I'm driving alone, I fear anxiety attacks. I have thoughts that scare me. That may be what you're experiencing today. And I think there was a magical moment when I met with my therapist for the first time and kind of told her, okay, this is what I'm experiencing. And she just smiled and said, you're going to be okay. Yeah. You're not crazy. Yeah. And that's the magic moment. You're not crazy. Yeah. You're going through something right now that there's a pathway through. It might not feel like it. So I want people to take comfort in that. I also want people to realize that admitting that you have the problem is that takes a lot of strength and courage.
Yes.
But having lived with it your whole life is a testament to how strong you are. You see, it isn't like you're strong all these years, you stay quiet about it, and then you're weak when you say you go and need help. You are gradually getting stronger every day you fight this fight. And so you're never weak in it. Yeah. You have to stay in it, though. And I guess the only time you're weak in it is when you give into it. And there'll be times when you feel like it.
Yeah. And you're going to feel like you've lost, and you're going to feel like you're not at your best. But when I call the definition of success having a dream and not giving up on it yet. I mean, as long as you're trying. But, I think of myself, I think of the airplane analogy and the airplane's in trouble. The first thing they tell you to do is put the air mask on yourself so that you can help other people. It's a similar analogy when you're building a castle on sand or a castle on rock. I mean, you could build a really nice house on sand, but man, it ain't going to last. And, or you can take it back a second, do the hard work on yourself and your foundation and build from there. The Dash of Grit podcast is brought to you by Spire. Spire creates results-driven digital marketing and websites that help companies grow. Are you ready to break through the barriers that hold your company back? Take your growth higher with Spire. Learn more at spiread.com. So, Dan, I can't thank you enough for sharing the story. It takes a lot of vulnerability and a lot of class to share it. I wish it didn't take as much courage as people think it takes. And I know you don't have an issue with that anymore. And so, if one person is out there that feels like they could benefit from talking with you about this or about the food bank or anything else that you've got going on, is it okay if they reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. My email address is dflowers@acrfb.org. You might be able to put it out there, Brian, if anybody wants to get a hold of you too. But I'm glad to help people in any way I can. And kindness isn't a sign of weakness. Vulnerability isn't a sign of weakness. You're stronger than you think you are. You just got to keep keeping the game. One thing I would mention too, a couple tips for people that may be struggling with anxiety today before we hang up, Brian, is cardio. I get a lot of cardio, and that's a huge thing. Just the natural endorphins that you get from it will help relieve your anxiety. If you've got a big speech or big project, if you get some cardio before you go in, you're always going to be better off. Yep. And I always recommend too, if you've got a big presentation of some kind to get, if you're going to be speaking in public, and you've gone through something like I've gone through and had like an anxiety meltdown in front of people, and now I write my speeches out. Doing these kind of things, I don't worry about it anymore. Yep. But if I have to perform in front of a group and there's an expectation, some level of formality, I always write it out word for word and I practice it. And if you get up in front of the group and you're vibing and you're feeling good, you'll be better off because you were so prepared to begin with. Yep. And if you're not vibing, lock in, read your speech, and live to fight another day. Yep. So that's what you got to do. And if you do those two things, get your cardio, write your speech before you give it, you're going to take care of your anxiety issue 95%.
Yep. And when that doesn't work, go get some help. And I think that's the key. Take care of yourself and get it done. And don't hold on to that forever because it's not going to go away. Dan, thank you. This has been Dash of Grit. Sometimes grit is about getting through your issue. In this case, grit is asking for help and going and getting some help for some very important things. And so I appreciate your sharing the story. Folks, if you're interested in more stories of grit, both personal and business, you'll find them here wherever you hear your podcast. This is Dash of Grit. I'm Brian Levelock. Dan Flowers from the Akron-Canton Regional Food Bank. Thank you for sharing your story on A Dash of Grit.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Stay hard, everybody.
Take care.
This is A Dash of Grit. Recipes for success from courageous leaders who overcome challenges and build great things.